is it that the women with the least likelihood of getting pregnant are the ones most worried about having abortions? Nobody wants to impregnate you if you look like a thumb.
Is it safe to say that based off of your comments, you're suggesting that these women at these abortion rallies are ugly and overweight?
Yes.
What do you say to people who think that those comments are offensive?
Be offended.
Okay, and welcome to Continue Freedom. This is our, I guess, second live stream. We did one last week. I hope you guys watched that intro. I'll probably play it again here in a minute. But Donald Trump, the picks he is making are absolutely off the chain, and he's just not messing around. It's essentially like he's given a finger to the deep state, to the establishment, and it's fighting back, and it's fighting back in a lot of ways. One of which is, when it comes to the Senate Majority Leader's position and a secret vote being held in the Senate, which I'm sure everybody heard about that one. And John Thune was the one that they chose behind closed doors, jacked up situation. But it's already starting with Matt Gaetz and Pete Hegseth. He's one of the ones that's also ruffling some feathers. The fact that Donald Trump made him Secretary of Defense, or is going to make him Secretary of Defense. But let's do a quick rundown here of what we've got. We've got J.D. Vance as Vice President. We've got Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. We've got Matt Gaetz as Attorney General. Pete Hegseth as the Defense Secretary. Secretary of Homeland Security is Kristi Noem. Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. National Security Advisor, Mike Walls. CIA Director, John Ratcliffe. White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles. EPA Administrator, Lee Zeldin. Ambassador to the United Nations, Elise Stefanik. I mean, this is just like, border czar, Tom Homan, huge one. Mike Huckabee, ambassador to Israel, pulling Mike Huckabee back into the mix. So the choices he's making, Mike Huckabee's not what I would consider a non-establishment guy necessarily, but he certainly doesn't fall in line with the normal, run-of-the-mill politics. And the same thing goes for his daughter. These are folks that have in a lot of ways bucked the system, but I mean, come on. We have to talk about Matt Gaetz. That's the big one. Now, and we'll get to it in just a second. But John Thune, he says, this is what he says, now that he is the Senate Majority Leader, that he is going to do whatever he can to push Trump's nominees through quickly. Now, they're talking about some recess appointments. I don't know exactly how this is going to play out. Thomas Massie was grabbed on an elevator, actually, and one of the reporters asked him, said, well, what's going to happen with Trump's nominees? And he said, recess. Matt Gaetz is going to be the Attorney General. And he said, suck it up or something like that. Grow up, suck it up. I forget what it was. But if there's an option for, these senators to pull blocker, several of them, especially on Matt Gaetz, several of them are, or say they're going to. Some of them are a little gray, about it. Lindsey Graham came out and said, well, I just don't know yet. He said, I'll think about it, but I don't know. What is there to think about? The people of South Carolina, they elected Donald Trump. They want Donald Trump to put in the people that are going to carry his agenda forward. So I don't get what the problem is, other than you have some beef with Matt Gaetz. We've got Susan Collins. She came out and she says she is opposed to Matt Gaetz as Trump's Attorney General. Well, why on earth, Susan Collins? Why? Because he's going to be too strict. He's going to be too harsh. He's going to, enforce the law to just, he might go a little too far. He might go a little too far, because that's exactly what Chuck Schumer is saying. Chuck Schumer on the floor. Listen to his rhetoric. Listen to the rhetoric now. So think Chuck Schumer and Adam Schiff and all those. Oh, speaking of Adam Schiff, we'll get to a funny one about him here in a minute. But this is their rhetoric now. See how it's turned on a dime. Listen to him. I don't know if I can turn the volume up here. Come on, volume. There it goes.
Now let me turn to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Another closely contested election now comes to an end. To my Republican colleagues, I offer a word of caution in good faith. Take care not to misread the will of the people, and do not abandon the need for bipartisanship.
Whoa.
After winning an election, the temptation may be to go to the extreme. We've seen that happen over the decades, and it's consistently backfired on the party in power. So instead of going to the extremes, I remind my colleagues.
Okay, I gotta have to pause just for, well, I'll go ahead and play it through, but he's talking bipartisanship. He's saying taking it too far. Are you kidding me? This is the Democrat Party we're talking about.
That this body is most effective when it's bipartisan. If we want in the next 4 years the Senate to be as productive as the last 4, the only way that will happen is through bipartisan cooperation. Democrats will be ready to do what we have consistently done. Work with both sides when the opportunity arises. Democrats will never abandon our values, but neither will we reject an opportunity to move the ball forward to make people's lives better when we can. The question is now whether or not Republicans are willing to do the same.
Oh, wow. Okay, so now it's bipartisanship. Now it's let's turn the temperature down. Don't go too far, guys. Don't go too far. What, in enforcing the law? Moving us back towards the Constitution? Restoring, the purchasing power to the American people? Knocking down inflation? We'll talk briefly about the spending bill that they just pushed forward. But all of a sudden, they lose. They don't have the House. They don't have the Senate. They don't have the presidency. Donald Trump is putting in these high-powered players into his cabinet, and they're freaking out. And they're saying, well, now we got to turn the temperature down, guys. They're going to play moderate now. The same ones that have been yelling about Trump and all of his supporters being fascist, being hateful, being bigots, being xenophobes, homophobes, whatever you could think of. They've thrown out every pejorative that you could possibly think of. And now all of a sudden, when they've lost everything, they're going to try to sit back and play moderate. That's not how this is going to work, and that's not how we get change. Change, we have compromised. I've said this several times on my podcast, but we have compromised to the left consistently for my entire life, and I'm 43 years old. For 43 years, the compromise has always been to one side of the aisle and never towards the right, never towards the Constitution, freedom, liberty. And we only had the option, go back all the way back to our founding. The only place we had to go was to the left. I mean, look at the way that our government was run early on in its infancy. They barely had any money. It was, it was freedom and liberty is what everybody was experiencing. Actually, I would say it was true freedom and liberty. Exceptions, obviously, because we still had slavery and things like that. But at the end of the day, we only had the left was the only option we could move towards, which was towards authoritarianism, towards larger government, and all of those things. And we have taken that to the nth degree, and to fix that and move us back towards the right, it takes people like somebody like a Matt Gaetz to go in and shake the tree a bit. And so Trump is doing it, and the left is freaking out about it. The establishment is freaking out about it. Some people actually recognize this. Well, actually, let me show you this one first. This was really funny. Elon chimed in when Adam Schiff came out and made this X post, and he said, first, the Supreme Court granted a president immunity for weaponizing the Justice Department. Now Donald Trump wants to appoint Matt Gaetz as AG. Confirming him would mean affirming the worst potential abuses of the DOJ. He must be rejected by the Senate. And Elon Musk came out and he said, the hammer of justice is coming. Elon Musk he's become he's always been a pretty decent troll, but he's really been getting into this. The DOGE, DOGE, which is the Department of Government Efficiency that he and Vivek are going to be heading up. They already have an X account, and I'm going to assume that it's at 1 million subscribers. After a couple hours, it was already up to like 250,000. But nonetheless, the Trump is kind of trolling the left, and he's trolling the establishment. And even John Fetterman came out and admits that this is a troll. Listen to this. He's joking about it.
I mean, I would describe it as God tier level trolling to just trigger a full-on China syndrome to own the libs in perpetuity.
And it's very true. I mean, people are freaking out about it. And I like seeing it. I like seeing the antibody reaction when, somebody is coming in to disrupt the system. I like seeing it. I think it's a good thing. Now, one of the people, Pete Hegseth, who is, as the left will tell you, simply a Fox News host. This is from MSNBC. Trump's Secretary of Defense pick is a wildly unqualified Fox News host. Oh, they forget about his 20 years of military service. They can't mention that. Otherwise, that might be a bit too honest for folks on the left. So yeah, he's just a Fox News host. Not to mention he went to, I believe it was Princeton and Harvard. Was that it? or it was Ivy League schools, incredibly intelligent. He was a battalion commander. He has commanded soldiers in combat. And look, for Secretary of Defense, you have to understand the system. A lot of this stuff is delegated. It's decision-making ability. It's intellect. We've had generals time and time again. We've had some that weren't generals, some people that were never in the service. And yet they jumped down, Donald Trump's throat for picking Pete Hegseth because his last job happened to be a commentator on Fox News. But they completely discredit his 20 years of service. This guy loves this country. This guy has done amazing things for veterans. And you're probably going to see on social media the post of him in his, we call them Ranger panties, but they're like the short shorts. And he's carrying an American flag, and he's at the 9/11 memorial. Well, he just got through swimming across the river with a bunch of other vets to raise money for a charity. So even in that, just throwing a picture up of Pete Hegseth, and they're going to try to mislead you. And let's remember, these same people who say he's wildly unqualified, that Pete Hegseth is wildly unqualified, told you this guy could be an admiral. So this is an admiral in the Biden administration, but Pete Hegseth, a guy with 2 Bronze Stars, combat deployments, commanded troops in combat, he's unqualified. Y'all see the silliness behind all this stuff? It's so frustrating, and that's why I kind of revel in their freak out that they're having, this temper tantrum that they're throwing because of his picks. And, there's the one that I keep seeing people say this. They love to bring up the old, not tropes, but the old conspiracy theories that they threw out there. That Tulsi Gabbard was an agent of Russia is one of the ones that they have thrown out there. And of course, now that one's making a comeback since she's going to be the director of national intelligence, which is awesome. But President-elect Donald Trump has announced that former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard will serve as the next director of national intelligence. In a statement released Monday, Trump highlighted Gabbard's military background and bipartisan appeal, praising her dedication to national security and constitutional rights. And you all know this. She used to be, on the left. She was a Democrat for the longest time, and just recently, as part of Trump's campaign, has come out as a Republican, has switched her party to be a Republican. But for 2 decades, the article goes on, for 2 decades, Tulsi has fought for our country and the freedoms of all Americans, the statement read. As a former candidate for the Democrat presidential nomination, she has broad support in both parties. She is now a proud Republican. I know Tulsi will bring the fearless spirit that has defined her illustrious career to our intelligence community, championing our constitutional rights and securing peace through strength. Yep. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, look, she's a common sense person. I was having a conversation, it was a text conversation with one of my old Army buddies, and he wasn't wholly impressed. He said, yeah, I'm impressed with her recent change, but she's somebody that at least aligns on the core issues, the Bill of Rights, and she's come around on the Second Amendment in a very big way, to my understanding. And really, if you stick to the Bill of Rights, it's kind of hard to go wrong. It's when people start deviating from the Bill of Rights, and it's, the Democrat Party has done that in spades because it's, declaring all of these different things, human rights, and when you declare them all human rights, then if you can declare a right, you can take that right away, i.e. the federal government can. Tulsi's not, she's not in that camp. She's not in that camp. And she believes that in some ways, with healthcare and things like that, I think she's still fairly progressive as far as that's concerned. But at the end of the day, she backs the First Amendment. She backs the Second Amendment. She believes in our Bill of Rights. She loves our Constitution. She loves our country. And she's a woman of very sound moral principle. And what else could you want in your representatives? And that's what this whole, by the way, a lot of these folks that Trump is bringing on board are in their 30s and 40s. Vivek is 39. Everybody else, they're in their 40s. You've got some older folks. I mean, Tom Homan's not in his 40s anymore, but he's still a bulldog. But he's bringing on this young generation of constitutional leadership, and he's putting them in the very seats of power that have been held by the old establishment for a very long time. And that's something we haven't seen since our founding. Remember our founding fathers? These were not old men when they were drafting our Constitution. These were young men, young citizens, people who were committing treason at the time, but taking a bold step for the good of their countrymen, for the good of their people. And we're at a breaking point now politically and socially, and I feel like that's what Trump is bringing in. As an old guy, as a 78-year-old guy, He's bringing in this young generation of leadership, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to see. Now, I told you about Tom Homan. This is one that they're absolutely flipping out about, and I've got a couple clips to show you why they're flipping out about Tom Homan. Tom Homan, his his concern about being politically correct, about rubbing anybody the wrong way, that meter is pegged all the way down on empty. He just doesn't care anymore. And y'all might remember this. I don't know if you saw this several years ago, but this was, I think, during Trump's administration. But he got into it with AOC. And listen to this little exchange. This is a good one. Definitely worth a re-listen.
Name is on this. Is this correct?
Yes, I signed that memo.
So you are the author of the family separation policy?
I am not the author of this memo.
You're not the author, but you signed the memo?
Yes, a zero tolerance memo.
So you provided the official recommendation to Secretary Nielsen on for the United States to pursue family separation?
I gave Secretary Nielsen numerous recommendations on how to secure the border and save lives.
But it says here that you gave her numerous options, but the recommendation was option 3, family separation.
What I'm saying, this is not the only paper where we've given the Secretary numerous options to secure the border and save lives.
And so the recommendation, of the many that you recommended family separation.
I recommended zero tolerance.
Which includes family separation.
The same as is with every U.S. citizen parent gets arrested when they're with a child.
Zero tolerance was interpreted as the policy that separated children from their...
If I get arrested for DUI and I have a young child in the car, I'm going to be separated. When I was a police officer in New York and I arrested a father for domestic violence, I separated that father from his family.
Mr. Homan, with all due respect, legal asylees are not charged with any crime.
When you're into the country illegally, it's violation 8 United States Code 1325.
Seeking asylum is legal.
If you want to seek asylum, you go through the port of entry, do it the legal way. The Attorney General of the United States has made that clear.
Boom. And I don't know if AOC was she's just that dumb, I guess. I'm trying to think of another term, but dumb's the only one that really comes to mind at the moment. Or if they've made this argument that all these folks coming across are legal asylees, and it's just not the case. And Tom Homan recognizes that it's not the case. And now that it has come to a breaking point, a boiling point at our border, this is what Tom Homan says about family separation. And he's, this is their concern, right? All these kids that have been trafficked across the border, that they're going to be separated from their guardians. In a lot of cases, it's actually the people that are trafficking them. But listen to what he said now. This was in a 60-minute interview, and the left is going nuts about it.
Seen one estimate that says it would cost $88 billion to deport 1 million people a year.
I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Is that what American taxpayers should expect?
What price do you put on national security? Is that worth it?
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
Whoa. Yeah, of course. We don't have to do family separation. We'll just deport the whole family, which is how it should be. Donald Trump is already talking about ending birthright citizenship. What the tourism is, what do they call it? Where they basically come over here, in a tourist type of way to have their kids so the kid can, it's a ridiculous concept. The birthright citizenship is ridiculous just because, if you're here illegally, but your kid is born here, all of a sudden your kid's an American citizen and can bring their family here. It's absolutely ridiculous. And this has to stop. It has to stop. We can't afford this anymore. The cities like New York and Chicago are being overrun. We've seen Aurora, Colorado, apartment complexes being taken over. There's no control over who's coming across the border. These people are having kids. And now our silly government says that these kids are now American citizens with all the rights therein. It makes zero sense. And Tom Homan is the guy because, you know what? He's like, yep, I've done this before. I know how to deport people. I know law enforcement. I know deportations. And he's getting on board with it. And go Tom Homan. I'm all about it. The social safety net is the big problem, right? It's not just that, but you got the criminals. If we're not vetting people and they're coming across with it leads to crime issues and all that. But the social safety net, pumping tens of thousands of dollars onto EBT cards for illegal immigrants. Meanwhile, You know, you've got homeless veterans who are getting a couple $100 a month to help them out, but you've got illegal immigrants with $13,000 sitting on an EBT card. We have to see the disparity there, right? Everybody should see the disparity there. And I'm all about immigration, and I know a lot of you folks are all about immigration, but legal immigration. Who are we bringing here? The vetting process should be long and arduous and difficult. And we have to make sure that we're getting the best and brightest, that we're not getting criminals, that we're not getting folks that with the intent of facilitating drug trafficking. And when that process, everybody says, well, we need to speed it up. We need to make it faster. I don't necessarily think so. It's supposed to be a long, difficult process. And you notice this in the immigrants that we see now that have been here for decades, that came the legal way. They know more about American civics than a lot of American citizens do. They have a vested interest in being here because they worked hard and they spent a great deal, probably a great deal of money to come to this country. And they have a great appreciation for this country. Meanwhile, there's a lot of Americans who are spoiled and think that simply bringing someone into this country and just magically bestowing on them the right to be an American citizen is somehow beneficial to this country. But that's how you get New York spending billions of dollars on its illegal immigration problem. Chicago, same thing. Aurora, Colorado, people under siege, properties under siege by Venezuelan gangs. And it's at San Antonio, or not San Antonio, I think it was in Austin. Was it Austin or San Antonio? I forget where else it was, but it's happening in other places. It's an epidemic that has to stop. And Tom Homan is the guy that's going to do it. Now, as I was saying before, they say that GOP leadership. Here we go. This is the one. So the candidates. This was earlier, but they say they're going to support Trump's request to agree to recess appointments. I'm not going to show that one. That's the old article. Essentially, what these guys are saying is that we're going to push it through. And as I was telling you earlier in the show, there's some that are pushing back. Well, pushing back in this way is going to start to have consequences because of the same guy who's been such a major player in this campaign, and that is Elon Musk. Elon Musk came out and says, this is allegedly, according to Nick Sortor, I forget how to say his name, Elon Musk is threatening to fund primary challengers against congressmen and senators who go against the Trump agenda, per Capitol Hill sources. So this guy with more money than he knows what to do with said, well, you know what? If these senators start playing hardball, if these senators don't go with the mandate of the people, I got some money I'll throw into a campaign. And here, let's get some more Matt Gaetz types around to replace some of these old rhinos. And that's freaking him out as well it should. Because this has been the problem in our politics for a very long time. Lindsey Graham being in there for 20 years, and there's boatloads others, but you get these politicians that sit in there for 15, 20, 30 years in some cases. They're never primaried. The status quo continues. And now we've got a guy with the resources who's got a vested interest, obviously, in this country. He's got the largest EV company. He's the one who's essentially single-handedly running our space program. I mean, this guy is doing amazing, amazing things. Some are a little dicey. The robot thing freaked me out at his big release event. I don't know if that freaked you guys out or not. But he's saying, well, I'll put my money where my mouth is. We can't continue. He's got kids. He's got like 10 kids or something crazy. And he's saying, I care about the future of this country. I care about America. It's the shining city on the hill. It's the brightest place on earth. And if we let these corrupt politicians who have been in here for decades snuff that out, then all is lost. And it happens across the globe. A lot of folks say this, but I picked it up somewhere. I don't know where it was. But when we experience inflation, other places experience famine. When America is doing poorly, a lot of other places in the world are doing poorly. And they're doing worse. And there's people starving. And the bureaucracy has become bloated. Anthony Fauci is a prime example of that. I'm going to skip to this one real quick because I thought it to be the perfect example of government out of control, I guess you could say. But his salary, when he was in his position, was $480,000 per year. He had $15 million in taxpayer-funded security post-retirement. Anthony Fauci, the guy who shut down our country, the guy who one of Trump's biggest mistakes is that he never fired this guy. He listened to him through and through because he had been in the system for a long time, thought he was a trusted individual. But he received $15 million in taxpayer-funded security for 2 years after his retirement. Fauci was the chief medical advisor to President Biden and director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. Since leaving NIAID, Fauci has been guarded against the dangers of the extreme radical right. Okay. Once Fauci was gone, people didn't care. Let's be perfectly honest. So he had U.S. Marshals and HHS and all these folks out here protecting him. But on top of that, take a look at this. His estimated pension, according to Open the Books, is in the neighborhood of $355,000 per year. This is what happens when you get into politics for a long time. You're kind of writing your own checks here. So his monthly income, $40,000, $54, before, this is when he was in full time, $480,000 a year. He was getting above the average income of an average American every month. All to be nothing the guy hadn't been successful in his job. The guy was atrocious during COVID. He was a tyrant during COVID. But he's going to be making $355,000 in his retirement. How's your all's retirement looking, by the way? So he's also written books. He's gotten professorships. He's gotten all this crazy stuff. So, the bureaucracy, these fat cats making their living off the federal government, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about, this is a good one. This is from the New York Post, but it's made its way all around the internet. So the FBI has seized the Polymarket CEO's phone and electronics and all that after the betting platform predicts a Trump win. Really? So I was relying heavily on the Polymarkets. There were a lot of folks who were saying, don't listen to the Polymarkets, don't listen to the Polymarkets. But they turned out to be the most accurate. And this is because it's a bit more of an open source type platform. It's based on the people and people's perceptions and people's gut reactions and feelings and all that kind of stuff. And so he was posting things on the presidential race. He did it on the House and the Senate. He had, there were polls on everything. But he wound up being wildly, wildly accurate. And all of a sudden, the FBI raided his Manhattan apartment at 6 o'clock in the morning. Again, something that they could have done over the phone between the lawyers. But no, what have we seen? Every time they want to make a political spectacle, anytime they want to send a message to someone, the 6 a.m. raid, the FBI loves them. The DOJ, they love it. That's going to stop. But they got to make a spectacle. They got to scare people off. Why might that be? He was talking about bringing his organization back to America. I don't think he has yet, and this will probably put a damper on that one. But 6 a.m. raid for the guy who was actually able to predict the markets, all this. Here's my speculation. My speculation is the polls now, we know the polls are corrupted. The polls were wrong. The polls were atrocious, but the polls are used to manipulate people. The Polymarket wasn't there to manipulate. And again, some folks had issues with this guy because he was seen at a fundraising party with Tim Walz, but he was also fairly cozy, apparently, with Donald Trump Jr., according to some accounts. So it's not like he was necessarily playing one side of the political aisle. But scare this guy away, try to take him out of the space, because when you start to disrupt the polling, now you're disrupting the messaging. The deep state messaging is controlled through the polls. People are manipulated through the polls. Even after everything that happened in 2016, people still turn around. The polling, listen to the polling. And even Donald Trump admitted, yeah, he touts the polls, but he doesn't necessarily believe all the polls. Wild. That's overreach. That's the kind of stuff that's not going to be happening in this administration, at least as far as I can tell. And at least it's not going to be to try to, sway individuals. It's going to be because somebody did something wrong. We're actually going to get a little bit of justice in this next administration. Now, as a result of all these changes, this is another Elon post that I had to share with you guys. There's a mass exodus from X. So since all of this stuff has been happening, and people like the Krasensteins and some of these other commentators, They're saying, all right, I'm done with it because they're getting all this hate online. They've lost subscribers because people realized that their messaging was just a bunch of bunk. It was ridiculous. It was unnecessary, or it was wrong. They were lying to them. They were being manipulated. So people just stopped subscribing to them. They lost subscribers. And then some of them came out and said, well, I'm just leaving altogether. People like Don Lemon. He said, I think he might have misspelled his name on purpose, but The Guardian and also Don Mellon don't have to announce their departures. X is not an airport. Elon Musk is essentially saying, I don't really care if you're here or not. His site was the #1 source for news. So if you're really interested in communicating with people, you stay on X. And Don Lemon, in fact, 6 hours after he said he was leaving X, came out and made an X post. So it's theater. They're doing this for theater. And it's like the women that are cutting their hair and putting the blue bracelets on. This is all theater. It's throwing a temper tantrum. It'll settle down. Their 401ks will get in better shape. They'll be making a little more money. Their money will go a little further, and emotions will settle, and emotions will temper. And they're already being tempered in the White House. You know, when we were told by Joe Biden that Donald Trump was a dictator, that he was a threat to our democracy, that he was, I didn't show it to you. There we go. That he was a threat to our democracy, that he was this evil guy. Awfully cordial. A few days after an election, awfully cordial for Donald Trump to sit down, glad hand with Joe Biden. Everybody's happy. Now he's still a threat to democracy, right? Is that what we're supposed to believe? I mean, listen, I'll let you listen to the conversation because this is actually worth listening to. It's history, right? This is part of history. Peaceful transfer of power.
All right, let's go
It's not yet, obviously. It's not till January, but
to their meeting.
Looking forward to having like we said, a smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. We're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So
good.
Welcome
Thank you
back.
very much, and thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate very much a transition that's so smooth. It'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Jim.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
and here's the reporters start going nuts, and Joe Biden is just laughing at him like, yeah, whatever. They share a couple smirks. They have some handshakes. Doesn't seem like he's handing it over to a dictator, right? Because he's not. He's not handing it over to a dictator. This is how we've been the folks on the left, you've been manipulated. It's this scare tactic when they don't have ideas. They don't have any way to implement the ideas that they do. Or they have poor ideas. They have no way to implement the poor ideas that they do have. So in order to get elected, all they're going to do is whoop and holler and tell you that this guy is the devil. And I'm thankful to say that a massive number of Americans, a historic number of Americans in some cases, came out to support the evil guy. People are starting to see through it. This is why CNN, by the way, is hemorrhaging viewers. I think they're at 50% drop in ratings. MSNBC as well. CNN is already saying that they're going to lay off a bunch of their top talent. I mean, pretty glorious to see that happening. I'll be interested to see if Elon steps in to buy a media outlet. Maybe he'll step in and buy CNN. He could probably get it cheap right now. Oh, wow. But anyway, guys, I know this was a fairly short live stream, but I had to hit these nominations. I love seeing it. I'm so happy that he's picking folks that are outside the box, people that are outside the norm. It's what we've been wanting. We have not been wanting the same old status quo, the same old establishment politicians. Those are the people that have been leading us astray for the past 43 years of my life. And they're the ones that have motivated me to get involved and probably motivated you to get involved as well. So it finally happened. Now here we go. Things are going to get nuts. It's going to be a wild ride, but I think it's going to be worth it. And I'm going to close on a video, the one I played at the intro, but you folks that are watching now, you probably didn't get to see it. I'll let you see a video of our next Attorney General. It's motivating. It's wonderful. Love you guys. I'll see you in the next video. God bless you. God bless America. And let's get Matt Gaetz in as the Attorney General.
Like, is it that the women with the least likelihood of getting pregnant are the ones most worried about having abortions? Nobody wants to impregnate you if you look like a thumb.
Is it safe to say that based off of your comments, you're suggesting that these women at these abortion rallies are ugly and overweight?
Yes.
What do you say to people who think that those comments are offensive?
Be offended.